So we're going to continue on with completing the square. I'm going to call it part 2 just because it's similar to what we did yesterday. We're just adding. And just as a reminder, because it's always good to write things out more than once, to complete the square, we use b divided by 2 squared, right? And what did that help us find? What did that find? C. That was my C term. So b divided by 2 squared gave me my C term. Now, we're actually physically looking at equations today. Okay, so we need to be in the form that looks like this, and it'll make more sense when numbers are around, but we need to have ax squared plus bx plus that C term we're filling in equals, I'm going to write the word constant, not to confuse you with C, so we're going to have another number. And then whatever you do to one side of an equation, you always have to do to the other side of the equation, right? So if you're solving 2x plus 5 equals 7, and you subtract 5, you have to subtract 5 from both sides. So when I add this C term to the left-hand side, I also have to add it to the right-hand side. Okay? So we're going to kind of jump in because I think it makes more sense when you just see an actual problem. So we're going to look at x squared minus 4x equals 3. So x squared minus 4x equals 3. Now, I need it to be in this form here. So what am I missing from this equation that this equation has? Technically, those blanks, right? I need to fill in the C term on this side. So we're going to rewrite it, and I didn't write it this way first because I don't want you to think they're going to be written for you. Hold on. So I'm adding my blank, and then equals 3 plus that same blank. Because, again, whatever I add to the left, I have to add to the right. And how did we fill in the blank yesterday? What did we use? B divided by 2 squared. That stays the same. Okay? So A is 1, B is negative 4, and C we're looking for, right? So B divided by 2 squared, negative 4 divided by 2 squared. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2, and negative 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to this blank, and whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side. Okay, so that's our first new step. So we still find C just like we did yesterday, but whatever we add to the left, we have to add to the right. So far, so good? Okay. Well, what if I took this away? What did I do with x squared minus 4x plus 4? What did I technically do with that? I supered x. All right, supered x. I factored it by using the super x, right? Or I use the trick. I know that the number right before I square it is my factor. So if I take this side, I really have x minus 2 squared. That's what this is, right? Everyone agree with that? Okay. Well, can I solve the right-hand side? Yeah, what's 3 plus 4? 7. What does that look like to you? Taking square roots, right? Do we know how to solve by taking square roots?
Yes.
Okay, so let's continue by taking square roots. So if I take the square root of both sides, the square root of negative 2, or x minus 2 squared is x minus 2 equals plus or minus. Can I simplify 7? No? So I'm going to keep it. Is x by itself? No? So let's add 2 to both sides. Can I combine 2 and that square root of 7? So where does 2 go? In front of the plus or minus. So your final answer is x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. So the only thing we're adding today, technically, that we haven't learned is we have to, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. And then once we simplify it, it's taking square roots. Okay? So this is just a third way to solve. So our first way was factoring. Our second way was taking square roots. Completing the square is the third way. But you should notice that in completing the square, you factored and you're taking square roots. Right? Which is why we teach those two things first, so that when you complete the square, it all should just flow if you can fill in those blanks. Okay, so let's do another one together, and then I'm going to have you try one. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do, I'm going to fill in, I'm going to write the blanks in for now, but know that they're not going to be given to you. You're going to get an equation like this, and you're going to have to do your own blanks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't want to have to rewrite it 15 times. So, x squared plus 16x, and then you're filling in this blank, equals 36, and then again, you're filling in this blank. Okay, so those blanks won't be there, but it's easy to write them in. All right. B divided by 2. What's my B? So 16 divided by 2 squared. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And 8 squared is 64. Everyone okay up to that point? Now I fill in 64 in my blank on both sides, because whatever I have do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side of the equation. Well, y'all are just moving on without me. You're like, we got this. I don't need you. Okay? If I ignore the right-hand side and I look at the left-hand side, what am I technically doing to the left? Factoring, right? I'm factoring. So if I factor, what's my factor going to be? 8. The number right before you square it. So x plus 8 squared equals 36 plus 64? 100. From there, taking square roots, which we did really good on. Okay, so if I take the square root of x plus 8 squared, I get x plus 8 equals plus or minus, what's the square root of 100? 10. Yes? 36 plus 64. So we filled in 64 here. Whatever you do on the left, you have to do on the right too. Okay? I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. Am I allowed to combine 10 and negative 8? Yes. Yeah, because there's no radical. So I have two physical answers. I have the plus 10 minus 8, and I have the negative 10 minus 8. What does that give me? 2 and negative 18. Are we okay with that? Okay, so I want you to try one. So start to finish, I want you to solve number 3. X squared minus 10x equals 11. Start to finish. Well, let's see where you're at. So, negative 10 divided by 2 squared is negative 5 squared. And then negative 5 squared is a positive 25. So you're adding 25 to both sides of your equation. Then if I factor the left-hand side, I get x minus 5 squared equals 36. Okay. From there, I'm going to take the square root. The square root of x minus 5 squared is x minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 36, which is 6. Add 5 to both sides to get x by itself. And I have 2 physical answers. I have 6 plus 5 and negative 6 plus 5. Your answer should be negative 1 and 11. How do we do? Good? Yeah. No. Okay, so that's a good question because some of you did this on your test. The question is, should they be plus or minus? No, because you split up that plus or minus when you split up the 6. Because you took the positive 6 and you took the negative 6. But there were some of you that still gave me an answer of plus or minus negative 1. Once you split up that plus or minus, you don't have to worry about using it again. The only time plus or minus is going to be in your answer is when you have the square root. When you have a single answer with the square root. When you have split it into 2, it's its own answer, and you split that plus or minus when you split the 2 answers.
If it's a single answer that doesn't have a square root, should it be plus or minus?
It shouldn't be a single answer without a square root. If you're doing completing the square or taking square roots.
Okay.
Okay? Isaiah, did you have your hand up?
If you can reduce the square root like the third column, you branch off all the time.
Yes. So if you can completely get rid of that square root, so this is a perfect square, then you're going to have 2 different answers. If your square root stays at all, that's when you keep it as one answer. Okay? All right. We need to add one additional thing to this. So we're doing this one together because there are a lot of things here that we need to look at. So, what's the first thing that you notice that we didn't have before? I hear a couple things. What did you say? There's a C here. So, where do you think this negative 8 needs to go? On the other side so that I can make it look like this. Right? Okay, so let's start by moving that negative 8. How do I move negative 8? Add 8. Okay, so if I add 8 to both sides, I have 6a squared plus 12a. Now I can add my blank, right? Equals 18 plus that blank. So now it looks more like that original example I showed you. Everyone agree with that? Okay. Is there anything else that you don't like that we haven't seen? Yes, but what are you noticing? Like what's different about this problem compared to every other problem? There's a number out front that's not 1. Okay? So we don't like that. That makes our lives really difficult. We need to get rid of that number out front. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to divide everything by 6. Divide everything by 6, because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if I divide by 6, I have a squared plus 2a plus my blank equals 3 plus my blank. Now doesn't it look exactly like all the other problems? Okay, so finish it from there. So my b is 2. So 2 divided by 2 squared is 1 squared. And 1 squared is just 1. If I factor what's on the left-hand side, I get a plus 1 squared equals 4. Take the square root of both sides. A plus 1 equals plus or minus 2. The square root of 4 is 2. Last step is to solve for a, so subtract 1. Is this where I keep one answer, or do I physically have 2? 2 answers. So a equals 2 minus 1 and negative 2 minus 1, which is 1 and negative 3. Okay, so let's recap for a second. Numbers 1 through 3 should be relatively straightforward. The only difference between yesterday and today is that we have a left-hand side and we're taking square roots. So the only difference is you have a left-hand side and you're taking square roots. This fourth one is going to be the most confusing. So your first step is to make it look like this. Your ax squared plus bx plus a blank, and then your constant term plus a blank. And then you have to check if there's a number in front of your squared term. If there is, you need to divide it out. You cannot complete the square if there is a number out front. Okay? Make your life easy, because once you get to this point, you should be able to go through the rest.